Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something every surgeon, especially if you're in GI, is going to face: short bowel syndrome. We're going to cut right to the chase and break down the absolute essentials you need to know.
So let's set the scene. You've got a patient on your list post-op, and you're told they have less than 200 centimeters of small bowel left. That's kind of the magic number where alarm bells start ringing for short bowel syndrome. The big question is, what do you do now? What's the game plan? So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the basics, definitions. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of anatomy, figure out who's in real trouble, walk through the medical management, and then finish up with what's new on the surgical front. Okay, let's get our definition straight right out of the gate. These two terms, short bowel syndrome and intestinal failure, get thrown around, but they are not the same thing, and the difference is absolutely critical.
So, at its core, short bowel syndrome, or SBS, is all about malabsorption. Simple as that. You've lost a big chunk of intestine, and what's left just can't keep up. It can't pull in enough nutrients, can't absorb enough fluid, and what you get is that classic, really tough to manage diarrhea, and the patient just spirals into malnutrition. And this is the next level. Intestinal failure, or IF, is when things get really serious. It's the clinical tipping point. We're past just malabsorption. Now, the gut has failed so badly that the patient literally cannot survive without IV nutrition, parenteral support. And knowing when a patient has crossed this line, well, it changes everything about how you manage them.
So who are these patients? What's bringing them to this point? Well, the data is pretty stark. The number one cause, by a long shot, is Crohn's disease. We're talking about half of all adult cases. After that, you've got your usual suspects: mesenteric vascular events, radiation enteritis, and of course, tumors requiring massive resection.
Okay, let's switch gears to anatomy, because this is where it gets really interesting. A key takeaway here is that not all bowel is created equal. It's not just about how much is left, it's about what is left. The specific piece of intestine and what it's hooked up to, that can completely change a patient's future.
And here's rule number one: the ileum is king. You have to think of the ileum as this functional powerhouse. Why? Well, its cells are packed together tighter, making it a superstar at absorbing fluid. But what's really amazing is its adaptability. The ileum can actually learn to do the jejunum's job if the jejunum is gone. But, and this is a huge but, it doesn't work the other way around. The jejunum just can't step up to fill the ileum's shoes. So preserving that ileum, it's everything.
And that brings us to rule number 2. The colon is your patient's absolute best friend in this scenario. If you can keep the small bowel plumbed into the colon, you're giving that patient a massive advantage. Think of the colon as this incredible safety net, soaking up extra fluid and electrolytes. Now, take that away, give the patient an end stoma, and that safety net is gone. They become incredibly fragile, super susceptible to dehydration. It's a total game changer.
Okay, so we've got our two golden rules: save the ileum and save the colon. With just those two principles, we can actually build a surprisingly accurate framework to predict who's going to tip over into intestinal failure.
And this really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's what the patient and their family want to know. Doc, am I going to be on IV feeds for the rest of my life? And the answer, a lot of the time, boils down to two simple things: how much bowel is left, and is the colon still in the picture?
This right here, this is basically your cheat sheet. Let's just look at the numbers, because they tell the whole story. If the colon is intact, a patient can, amazingly, get by with 50 to 100 centimeters of small bowel. It's tough, but possible. But look what happens when you have a stoma. The threshold jumps way up. Less than 100 centimeters with a stoma, it's almost a guarantee of intestinal failure. These are the numbers you gotta have in your head.
Okay, so we know who's at high risk. We know who likely has intestinal failure. So what's in our toolbox? Let's walk through the medical playbook. There's no ambiguity here. When a patient has true intestinal failure, the absolute cornerstone of treatment is home parenteral nutrition, or HPN. I mean, this is the therapy that single-handedly turned what was once a death sentence into a chronic condition people can live with. But HPN is not a solo act. You need a whole team of supporting medications to make it work. You've got your antidiarrheals like loperamide to slow everything down. You've got drugs to handle bile salt issues. You need PPIs to cut down on all that extra stomach acid. And on top of all that, you have to be obsessive about replacing vitamins and minerals. It's a complex puzzle. And here's the catch. HPN is a lifesaver, but it's also a double-edged sword. It comes with a whole host of serious long-term risks. We're talking about line infections, which are a constant worry. The IV nutrition itself can be tough on the liver, leading to fibrosis, not to mention gallstones, kidney stones, and bone disease. This is absolutely not a set-it-and-forget-it situation. It requires constant monitoring.
So that begs the question, what do you do when HPN isn't working anymore, or when the complications are becoming more dangerous than the original problem? That's when we have to turn to the surgical frontier. Let's wrap up by looking at those options.
For a while now, there's been a lot of work on surgeries that actually try to lengthen the bowel that's left over, kind of stretch it out to create more surface area for absorption. And while that's shown some real promise in kids, the truth is, for adults with SBS, the jury is still out. It's not quite prime time yet. And that leads us to the final option, the big one, a small bowel transplant. Right now, this is really a rescue therapy. It's for the patients who are truly at the end of the line with HPN. Maybe they've lost all their IV access points from too many infections and clots, or their liver's starting to fail because of the HPN. That's when you make the call. But look at this number. This is incredible. Over 80%. That's the 5-year survival right now in top centers. Think about that for a second. This procedure used to be seen as almost science fiction, incredibly risky. And now, we're seeing survival rates that are just phenomenal. It's a huge leap forward. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question for the future. As these transplant outcomes get better and better, the whole risk-benefit equation starts to shift, right? So will we see a day when a small bowel transplant isn't just a last-ditch effort to save someone from dying from HPN complications, but actually becomes a primary treatment for intestinal failure? Something to think about. That's really the question that's going to define the next chapter in this field.
Thank you for watching The Surgical Edge. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. You can also support us by joining and suggesting surgical topics that you would like us to cover. For more insights and content, do subscribe to our podcast.